folks, my name is Tom Vasel and welcome to the best of board game publishers. Today we're taking a look at Lookout games. And now last time, the last list I did was of Mayfair games. And Mayfair acquired Lookout games a few years ago, but I wanted to take a look at Lookout games specifically by themselves because they have brought games to the market which have really made a huge impact. For a while, they were working with Z-Man games, and so some of their games were published by Z-Man, but then they were gotten by Mayfair, and one of the games that they published, Agricola, has become Mayfair's new flagship game. Mayfair, for a while, had the Catan as its flagship game, but they sold that to Asmodee. So now they're really pushing Agricola. When you go to the conventions this year in 2017, I would imagine Agricola will be the game that they're pushing all over the place, along with their other games. Now, of course, Lookout Games probably is known and exists because of Uwe Rosenberg, because not only did he give them Agricola, but several other games in his catalog. Not all his games have been published through Lookout Games, but many of them have been. So I'm not going to really go into too much of a history of Lookout games. I'm just going to go here with my 10 favorite games from Lookout, but they're pretty fun. So number 10 is Feudality. Now, Feudality was published when Lookout was still working with Z-Man Games, and this was kind of an Catanish style game, I guess is the right word, as you are building different things and then putting them in the right spots so that when dice are rolled, you will get different things. That sounds very similar to Catan. I liked it. I thought the theme was strong. And when you look at the artwork, and artwork is one of those things, usually when I look at some artwork, I can go, that's a Lookout game. It's not always, but Lookout games have that similar feel. Feudality certainly fits in there. Number 9 for me is Agricola. There's no denying how strong and powerful Agricola is. I remember when it first came out, there was a furor over Agricola. Z-Man Games was not sure that the game would do well, so they did a pre-order system for Lookout Games, and boom, it just went crazy. People were pasting up this game. If you ever played Agricola, you know that there's cards in that game with a ton of text, and people were going crazy. I went out of my way. I played a foreign version where I was looking at the one language with a sheet here and going back and forth, which is a terrible way to play a game, but I was that excited about it. Agricola just made everyone go bonkers because this whole resourcing and it introduced the whole feed your people mechanism. But hey, Agricola is a game that even though some of the other games that Lookout Games themselves have done have surpassed Agricola and have kind of pushed it out of my collection, it still was a very fun game, and the card selection still offers more diversity probably than any game on the market. Number 8 is another Agricola game, and that's Agricola All Creatures Great and Small. So they want to make a small 2-player version of Agricola because that's the thing. You make small 2-player versions of games. But I really liked that because one of the things people like in Agricola is making these pens and getting animals into them. That's fun. Now in Agricola, you can't put too much effort into that because you need to do a little bit of everything. In Agricola All Creatures Great and Small, it's like, hey, forget everything else, just build pens, put animals in them. And people are like, ooh, that's fun. And they added a couple small expansions that added more to it. It wasn't nearly as diverse as Agricola, but it was a lot simpler and easier to get into and a lot of fun. Number 7 is Murano. Now, Murano is a very intriguing game to me because you're moving these boats around the outside of a board, and where you move the boat to basically determines the action that you will take. And it's this kind of point salad-ish game, and where there's all these different actions, and you're building buildings here to get points and that. But it works for me. I don't know what it is. I think that I like that canal as I move the boats on the outside. I think I like that. I like the interaction. I like the different you have kind of goal cards that you're trying to accomplish. And again, it has that look that I like of the Lookout game. So Murano. Number 6 is Patchwork. Whew. Has a 2-player game ever exploded? Uwe Rosenberg came in and made Patchwork. Now, more of his other recent games like A Feast for Odin and Cottage Garden are also using this mechanism, but he took something that people like, which is essentially Tetris, right? As you take these pieces, and in Patchwork, there's all kinds of weird pieces, and you're building this quilt. It's a 2-player game with buttons as the economy of this game. You move around, and wow, just, man, the people who get into this game and have fun playing it, it's very highly ranked at Board Game Geek. We did the People's Choice Awards in Dice Tower, and people really loved it there too, and I gotta admit, it is a lot of fun. Patchwork. Number 5 is Le Havre Inland Port. Le Havre was another huge game, very highly critically acclaimed. In fact, it's being reprinted this year in 2017. But the 2-player version, not as many people know about this one. It almost has a spreadsheet feel to it. So I don't think this one is going to apply to everyone, but it definitely is one that I like quite a bit as you're sitting here trying to move around different pieces in an economy and get the most points that way. That is Le Havre Inland Port. Number 4 is Grand Austria Hotel. I did not expect this one to be amazing. I don't know what I was thinking, but when I played, I said, wow, this is a really excellent game. Now, it's a little long with 4 players. Well, probably too long with 4 players, but with 2 or 3, it really snaps along. As you each have your hotel, you're trying to get different guests in your hotel. You're using special abilities. There's a dice mechanism where you're selecting dice and then using those dice to take different actions to bring these people in your hotel, find a good place, feed them, and then apparently whenever someone comes to your restaurant, if your meal is good enough, they will stay at your hotel. Well, regardless of whatever the theme of that is, there's a lot of different options, all different kinds of guests, many different ways to score points. A lot of fun, Grand Austria Hotel. Number 3 is Ora and Labora. Now, many times we look at the grand trilogy of Uwe Rosenberg games. We have Agricola, Le Havre, and Ora and Labora. And Ora and Labora is kind of the one that not as many people talk about. And even for me, it's the one that's not really in my collection anymore because as much as I like it, I think the other games kind of, replace it to some degree. But Ora and Labora had this really cool resource kind of dial thing. At first thing, you're like, what does this mean? But it really worked well as you're getting all sorts of resources and using those resources to build your area up and have different buildings and that score points. Very little luck in this game, but so many options, like mind-blowing amount of options. A really great game, Ora and Labora. Number 2 for me is the game that really kicked Agricola out, and that's Caverna. Caverna is similar to Agricola. I mean, it's essentially Agricola 2.0, except in this one you're dwarves, and in this one I felt like it was a more friendly version. That feeding your people thing became less of an option. They added an exploration or going on adventure thing for your dwarves, which I liked a lot. You could concentrate on one strategy rather than have to do a little bit of everything. And it took down some of the wide range options that Agricola has. And so you sacrifice that a bit, but it did not matter because I could play this game many times. And it was just as much fun each time as the rest. There's still a ton of options in the game. Beautiful components, really great Caverna. But my number 1 game, I've already mentioned it, being reprinted this year is Le Havre. I love Le Havre. Now, I will say, I will play a maximum of 3 players with Le Havre. I think it's a great 2 or 3 player game with 4 or 5. It's a decent game, but it's when you play with 2 and 3, just absolutely amazing. I love how in this game you have so many options, and each option is good. So I can say I can take this good option, or I can take this great option, or I can take this fantastic option. You stole that fantastic option, but I still have a great option here. You have to feed your people, but it was almost fun. Like, ooh, I'm going to take this big pile of fish. I'm going to turn this fish into smoked fish. I'm going to use this fish and bread to do this. There's so many buildings. Each game, there's some different special buildings that come out. It's such a satisfying game to play. It is one of my most played games in my collection, actually, because when I'm sitting around thinking, what should I play now? Le Havre is one of the ones that comes to mind. So those are my top 10 games from Lookout Games / Mayfair. What do you think? Tell me your favorite Lookout games in the comments. Now, there really isn't that many more of them. I would say they've done about 20, 25. And again, I'm kind of discluding Lookout Games publishes a lot of other companies' games, so there's some crossover there. But I'm looking at games that basically, when you look at the game, you say, that's a Lookout game. I think they're a fantastic company. I look forward to seeing what they've done in the future. They've had a couple duds over the year, but for the most part, they're great. They work with Mayfair Games, or Mayfair owns them, and while I've often talked about Mayfair's quality seems to be lower than I would prefer it to be, Lookout Games do not have that problem. They have that distinctive artwork. They usually have a lot of options. I can't wait to see what they do next. That's Lookout Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.